Different sports have different strategies. You were captain or you played sports which had multiple other players in the same team, and then you also played table tennis, which is a single player game. How are those games different, and what did you learn from both of them?
When you're not performing at your peak, you're not at 100%, you're having an off day. When you're a single player, you sort of feel it, right? In a team game, you can tell people, I'm not playing my A game today, so somebody else, you'll have to make up for some of the things that I do, right? Versus in TT, if I'm not in my A game that day, it's really hard. You have no one to fall back on.
At what point data versus a gut feeling becomes an important judgment criteria?
Gut feeling also comes from having seen a lot of data over the years, right? It's just that intuition is because you've seen so many data points over 20 years or so that you intuitively know, this is not going to work, right? So it's not as different as people imagine it to be. I think for a lot of our hypotheses, right, starting out saying, I want to test this hypothesis, that hypothesis comes from intuition. Now, what data does a really good job is prove or disprove your hypotheses with a certain level of confidence.
My next guest is Shruthi Harikrishna. At 14, Shruthi made a decision that went against the conventional path many ambitious students follow. That choice reflected a mindset that would later take her from an early stage startup to leading analytics, innovation, and AI at Adobe. In this conversation, we discuss curiosity, failures, sports, meditation, and how to balance ambition with contentment in a world obsessed with achievement. We kick this off asking her if she's an introvert, extrovert, or an ambivert.
I'd like to call myself an ideavert or a passionvert. So what sort of energizes me is new ideas. So put me in a room full of passionate people who are talking about new ways of thinking, doing things, and I'm automatically energized and I can go on for hours together. Put me in a room where we're talking about people, politics, things like that, and I switch off immediately. So I think I'm neither extrovert nor introvert. I would love to call myself an ideavert. There's an interesting story. So when I was just married and my husband met all of my friends, he said, oh, you've got an eclectic bunch of friends and I can't seem to tell what your type is. What kind of people do you like? I said, do you realize they're all very passionate people? Someone's passionate about cooking, somebody else is passionate about photography, or, they've got their enthusiasm and zest. So they may not all look alike on the surface, but if you go slightly deeper inside, passion and ideas. So that's also a good way to sort of define myself, right? I get energized by ideas and passion and people who have that.
How was early life?
I hadn't thought of it while I was growing up. It's only when I came to my mid-20s and 30s when I heard people talking about feminism and about generally the Indian familial structure. It's got both its advantages and disadvantages, but I realized how privileged I was to have been brought up in a family that treated my brother and I equally. And my father and my mother both have teaching roots. My dad's an IITian. He designed the first pilotless target aircraft. He's a scientist and all of that. But he encouraged us to, be curious. He would encourage us to say, why is something this way? Don't take answers that people give you. Keep asking why. And my mother was a school teacher and retired as a principal. So again, all of those bits about being curious, I think was always there. A couple of stories that I would love to share. One is to talk about this curiosity and not taking an answer that's obvious at face value. My father once brought a leaf to my brother and I and said, what is the color of this leaf? We giggled thinking that's playing a joke. We said, green, of course. He said, are you so sure? So we said, yes, obviously it's green. What's there to contest, right? And then he said, okay, 1 minute. And he changed the bulb in the house from a regular bulb to a red colored bulb. And then he showed us the leaf again under that little red light and said, what is the color of the leaf now? And it sounds like such a simple thing, but as a child, I was mind blown. I was like, wow, color is not a property of the leaf. There is something about what light are you viewing it under. So that element of don't take everything that you see at face value, keep questioning. I think that was deep down inside. And I was granted a lot of privileges. I just realized now. So when I was in class 10, I remember back then we had these coaching camps that would help you prep for IIT JEE. And my father brought a whole bunch of books and he said, do you want to enroll into that class? And I was somebody who loved playing throwball, who loved taking part in debates. I had a very active life outside of just study. So I asked him, Papa, will I have to give up some of those things if I have to have to do all of this? He said, yes, you will have to, beta, for the next 3 years. And I said, is there a good chance that I may not make it to an IIT after all of that? He said, yes, there is a good chance that you may not, but there's also a good chance that you may. Then I said, you really think it's worth it? Do I have to give up 3 years of doing everything that I love and put everything into this when there's a high chance that I may not make it? And he said, hey, valid question, and the decision is yours to make. This to a 14-year-old child, treating me like an adult and saying the decision is yours to make. I will give you all of the pros and cons. You think and decide. And this coming from an IIT, mind you. So it was somebody who said, you have the choice. And then I said, I don't want to do this. I want to do these many things in my life that's important to me. And he respected my decision. And I love the fact that I was given that much freedom. And when you make your own decisions, you sort of live up to it, saying, I made this decision, so make it count, right? Live fully and do everything that you want to do because the decision was mine. So that's sort of the upbringing. And we were always encouraged to speak up. All of these traits, I think, have helped me in good stead throughout the years. So yeah, I think I was very blessed to have such a lovely upbringing.
When you didn't choose to prepare for IIT, your parents, they didn't have any inhibitions or concerns?
So my dad, I almost say absolutely not. He was like, when he said it's your decision to make, 100% aligned. I think my mother was a little bit more of the school teacher in her sort of said, are you sure? There's a high chance you'd make it. Yes, you're giving up 3 years, but it's the rest of your life that's taken care of. And then I would logically argue with her saying, aren't there successful people who haven't made it to the IITs? Haven't there been IITians who haven't been successful? It's type 1, type 2, that little normal curve, and you're fitting me in there. Maybe I want to do some things differently. I think the one thing that both of them did is sort of have an intuition about, is my child truly committed to this? So when she's saying something, is she just saying, am I being lazy and saying I don't want to do it? Or am I, do I have my reasons? And even in their social circles, when people would say, oh, my child is getting into this place and that place, they would still stand up and respect what I had done. So I think I was very blessed.
You mentioned about sports. You were the captain for 3 different sports. How has that helped you in your personal life, in your professional life?
Sports has been like my lifeline, right? I've always enjoyed playing sports. One of the things that any sports person will tell you is you are completely in the present moment. You are in the here and now when you're playing a sport. If you're distracted, you can't play. You have to be responding to what's going on. So staying in the present moment, I think, is one lesson which is taken from sports, but has imbibed every aspect of my life. Truly playing as a team, knowing what are the strengths of your team, dipping into other people's strengths, celebrating together, sometimes stepping back and saying, hey, you are better suited to do this than I am. Playing to our own strengths, saying these are the strengths that we possess, while looking for weak points in the opponent and saying, do you play to your strengths? Do you tap into the weak points? What do you do? All of those elements are especially true in a working environment. You've got to take your team along. You are only as good as your team. I can be very supportive. I can get people, I'm very open with praise. I also let people know, we celebrate together. And when something goes wrong, I think we take collective responsibility. We don't push anybody under the bus. And that's a true team sort of game, deeply imbibed from sports, I think. So staying in the present moment and doing all of those things comes from sports for me.
Different sports have different strategies, and you were captain or you played sports which had multiple other players in the same team, and then you also played table tennis, which is a single player game. How are those games different? What did you learn from both of them?
When you're not performing at your peak, you're not at 100%, you're having an off day. When you're a single player, you feel it. There is no way to go. There is nobody else's strength to tap into. In a team game, you can tell people, hey, I'm not playing my A game today. So somebody else, you'll have to make up for some of the things that I do. So if I'm a good server in throw ball, let's say, for example, in I'm not feeling very energetic, I'm a little low on energy, I can tell someone, I don't think I'm going to be serving as many balls as I usually do. Someone else take my place. Versus in TT, if I'm not in my A game that day, it's really hard. You have no one to fall back on. Individual contributor versus team. But what that does when you're a single player is you go to your reserve of strength and you find it somewhere, saying, I have no one else to fall back on. Let me go to my own reserves and find the strength that's needed to just cross the finish line today, right? And then come back to it. So it sometimes pushes you to do your individual best versus in a team, you're sort of, relying on other people's strengths as well. And some days you can say, I'm going to step back a little bit, you step forward. So I think it's pros and cons. Working together in a team, sometimes you have to go to the fifth gear yourself. And then, doing that individual sport helps, I think.
Growing up, you played so many sports. Who were your stars?
I have one that I think the only person I've ever idolized was Steffi Graf. I used to imagine I was Steffi Graf winning the French Open. I had my speech also ready. What would I say, etc. And there's a funny story there. So I used to be a Pete Sampras fan, but I worshipped Steffi Graf. So when Graf started dating Agassi and I saw Pete Sampras versus Andre Agassi match, I was torn. I didn't know who to support, right? 'Cause I like Pete Sampras, but Agassi is Steffi Graf's boyfriend. Who do I support there? So the passion was that strong. I think for me, no one's come close to that, right? Growing up the last 30 years or so, no one else has taken her place.
You can speak a lot of languages.
Mm.
How did that come along and how has that contributed?
Yes, I can speak about 7 languages, but I think a lot of people do 2 to 3 in India. What different languages teach you, I think, in different ways of thinking. So, for instance, my mother tongue is Tulu, and I grew up in Bangalore. So, there was Kannada and Tulu, 2 languages that I knew. To date, when I'm at work and my default language is English, I think in English. But if I, have to express affection to my daughter, if I'm feeling really loving, I switch to my mother tongue, right? It's automatically in Tulu. If I'm petting an animal, interestingly, I speak in Tulu, right? So affection for me has come from the language that I first heard and what I heard from my mother and people that were loving around me. Then I learned French in school. That was dedicated discipline, the rules, understanding how to conjugate a verb, what are the tenses. Still had to apply all of those parts of my brains. So it's really different ways of thinking, right? And how does that translate in the workplace? So I work with a multinational company. So I've got European colleagues, Asian colleagues, people from the US, people who speak different languages. It's one thing to hear what they're saying. It's another to understand what is it that they're implying, what is it that they're not saying. And sometimes knowing many languages helps you get some of those nuances, saying, I understand the hesitation. I understand where this line is coming from and what is it that they're trying to imply. So you connect with people, I think, at a deeper level. You share what's unsaid, what's being implied, you get nuances and subtlety. I think that's what my language sort of exposure has given me.
You talked about working in a corporate. In the initial part of your career, you joined a startup as a 6th employee. How was that experience?
That was just a fabulous experience. And if you ask me if I were to go back and do things differently, would I do it differently? Absolutely not. I was employee number 6 or 7, depending on what time frame you looked at that startup. And we built a kick-ass product. All of us engineers were like, oh, this is so marvelous. And it was just the best product. The world's never seen something as good. But what happened is that startup went kaput, as a lot of startups do. So my analogy sort of goes back to physics, because I'm teaching my daughter that now. That one had tremendous potential energy. We had a product that was cool, that was kick-ass, etc. But we weren't able to convert that potential energy into kinetic energy. Who's going to pay for this product? Why will they pay for it? And how will we survive until we find those people who will pay for this product, right? So understanding the market, understanding pricing, understanding when do you go, what verticals, what industries, how do you sustain yourself, top line, bottom line, all of those thoughts didn't occur to us at all. We were like, oh, kick-ass product, we're really happy about it. And I think that has influenced the way I've built my career as well. It's not just about building intelligent things, not just things that you're saying, wow, this is super smart. It's actually about doing something which is useful, understanding Why will somebody want to buy your product? Or why will somebody want to, listen to what you have to say? How is it useful to them? And not just, being clever. I think that's been the lesson for me as well.
You worked in Tesco, Dell, now Adobe. All of these are big organizations. How do you help simplify complexity in a high paced, high risk environment like a startup, and also a big organization where you have multicultural employees, global mandates?
I think that's such a great question. So, yes, startups and large companies are different in the speed of delivery, in the levels of hierarchy that you have to get through, and some of the complexity of the organizational design. But one key element is the same, irrespective of the organization. They want to impact the top line or the bottom line of the company. You want to add value. So, the ability to say, how am I helping the person whom I'm working with? What decision of theirs is going to change because of what I am saying to them? That's really helpful. So, even with data, the signal to noise ratio, now we've all got so much data. There's always like a billion metrics, something's going up, something's going down. How do you narrow it down to 5 things that matter? And if Pritish is my stakeholder or you're my colleague, Pritish, what 5 metrics do you care about and why should you care about it? Help simplify choices. I think people find it, I remember a lot of stakeholders saying, oh, we've got these great dashboards. There are so many numbers. I do know this is green, this is red, but I don't know what to do next. If you're in a startup or in a large company, you will find that is so true. So if somebody comes to you and says, yes, there are 5 things which are green and 4 red, but this one red is higher than the other two because it contributes to 80% of your outcome. And these are the 3 possible steps that you can do. You are simplifying their job. They have more clarity to say, what do I do on a Monday morning when I come in? That really helps. And that's also a skill that one develops after seeing data for many years. I love it when data surprises me, when it sort of is unintuitive, right? My intuition is saying something, but the data is saying something else. I love looking at those. So, what is it that it's telling me? A question. And that usually gives you insights into something that can change the business, right? Run the business, yeah, it's okay. To change the business comes from those unintuitive numbers sometimes. And that's like a intuition that you develop. And I love looking at numbers because they don't really lie. You can always look at them and say, hey, here's the insight.
At what point data versus a gut feeling becomes an important judgment criteria?
Wow, that's a hard one, by the way. Gut feeling also comes from having seen a lot of data over the years. It's just that intuition is because you've seen so many data points over 20 years or so that you intuitively know, nah, this is not going to work. So it's not as different as people imagine it to be. And data and numbers need not necessarily come from a dashboard or from a balance sheet. It's going, meeting people, listening to them talk, looking at your warehouse. You're collecting data all the time. Our 5 senses are feeding us data all the time, and that's how you develop intuition. I think for a lot of our hypotheses, starting out saying, I want to test this hypothesis, that hypothesis comes from intuition. Over many years of understanding how a business is, you're saying, I have a hunch this is this way, can we test it? Now, what data does a really good job is prove or disprove your hypotheses with a certain level of confidence. And you're saying, hey, if you're a startup, I'm okay with a 65% confidence in this number, depending on your risk appetite. If you're a larger company or, I shouldn't say larger or smaller, I think based on your risk appetite, you might be comfortable with different levels of confidence. So data helps you back that intuition with numbers and saying, this is what the numbers are saying, your intuition is probably right. And let's try this.
We talked about simplifying complexity. We talked about intuition. You are a big believer of Vipassana, meditation. How has that influenced your character?
Unknowingly, even when I was a child, I remember I used to go for a walk with my parents early in the morning when I was about 11, 12. I used to accompany them. And I would see this family which was on the pavement, and it would have rained the previous evening. A family of 5, 7, sometimes a dog, a cow, all wrapped under one blanket. And I'd have questions, right? Saying, what has that child done? What has he or she done to deserve to be born into that family? what did I do to be born into the family that I did? The universe is a large space, billions of light years, and 15 meters is not even a rounding error, right? It's the same place essentially. But if I were born 50 meters away, I would be the one on that pavement. But no, something happened and I was born into this family, right? So I've always had those existential questions. And I read a lot of the scriptures, right? So a lot of the Hindu texts, a lot of the Buddhist texts, a lot of the Jain texts. So intuitively, I understood what they were saying, but I didn't know what I could do to change my life. So the practical aspect of how do you translate what's written to an actionable sort of outcome for yourself was what I was looking for. And one of my seniors, somebody that I really trusted, told me about Vipassana. So I did this in the final year of engineering. So when I was about 21 or so, I went for the 10-day course. And that is completely life altering for me. So if you're familiar with it, you sit for 10 days, you can't talk to anybody. You have 2 meals a day, so you don't have a third meal. And you're meditating anywhere from 10 to 12 hours a day. You can't take a phone, you can't take a book, you can't take music. There's just you and your mind, your monkey mind. And you realize how crazy your mind is sometimes. But Vipassana stands for seeing things the way they are. So essentially, the premise is whatever happens in the outside world, it causes a reaction in your body, a sensation in your body. And you are reacting to what's happening in your body, not what's happening on the outside. So if you learn to be equanimous and not react with attachment to something which is good and hatred to something which is terrible, if you can be equanimous, then you lead life a little bit more calmly. If you know Maslow's hierarchy, that's the absolute spiritual response that you could give. How that also translates to some of the lower levels is because you are meditating 10, 12 hours a day, you are focusing on small areas of your body or whatever, you develop sharp focus. So your ability to focus on tasks at hand increases quite a lot when you meditate. Your ability to stay in the present moment, not be bogged down by the past and the future, but truly live in the present moment also improves. I always believe that a better version of yourself brings a better version of your life. I'm not saying if something bad happens, it's because of you. No. But if you get to a better state, your life automatically gets to a better state as well. So it's a way of making oneself better and therefore your life better as well. So many aspects to it. There's existential questions, the ability to focus, the ability to be calm, to stay in the present moment, all of those. And they have wide ranging impact, as you can imagine. And I've been doing this for the last, if I tell you how many years, I'll have to give my age away. So I think a few decades, but it's had a profound impact on my life.
That's fascinating. And I think a lot of that learning of yours from Vipassana, meditation, self realization, you've poured it into your book,
Yeah.
The Store of Life. What's the concept behind it?
So I worked in Tesco for 5 years. So I was a retailer and I used to analyze the shopping basket of customers day in and day out. So the idea first struck when I was there saying life is also like a shopping experience. When you walk into a store, you have one finite resource, which is money. Unless you're Ambani or Adani, then you have an infinite resource perhaps. And you want to fill your basket with as many things as your money can buy you. Now, what is life with a shopping experience? You've got one finite resource, which is time. And that's finite, even if you're Ambani or Adani. And you want to fill things into your life basket to maximize your contentment. Everyone's given 24 hours, and we want to put things into our basket that make us content. So, for example, if I say I want to become the CEO of a Fortune 100 company, I've got to have a large packet of career in my basket, which means I have to allocate a large percentage of my 24 hours every day to my career. But if you were to say, I want to have career and a family, you can't allocate as much time because both of those are important priorities. And when I go home, I get to choose my basket and my basket alone. So there's no point in me looking at Pritish's basket and saying, wow, he's got such a big packet of hobbies and podcasts and he does all of these cool things. I don't have it. No, I get to take my basket. So that's the philosophy. But the book is stored via doodles. So it's not a text heavy book, it's a doodle heavy book. The original idea, in fact, was just doodles, but that didn't work. We had to put in text because the publisher said, no, you need to have text. But it's essentially telling you how can you say no? How do you delegate? How do you stay in the present moment? How do you live a life of contentment? All via doodles. So it's not meant to be a heavy philosophy book. It's more like a friend who puts her arm around you saying, life is not that complex. Let's make it simple. So that's essentially it. And hopefully a picture speaks 1,000 words. So there are about 237 pictures. So 237,000 words, the equivalent of that.
So when I look at my basket, what is the first thing I should reclaim?
Wow. Okay, it's a great question. I think I'm going to sound a little geeky, but I'd love to do like a time and motion analysis of my own life. Where do I spend most of my time in a week? Take a regular week and say, how much time am I spending on my job? How much time am I spending with my family? How much time am I spending on my health and things like that? And then take some time away and saying, are these the things that I want to have in my basket truly? Am I doing it for, how people are perceiving? I want people to perceive me. Or is this truly how I want to live my life? So, for instance, when you hit your 40 mark, usually you realize, oh, health is important and I haven't paid any attention. You've got to make the time to take care of your health, whether it's exercising, eating right, all of those things. So I think it's really important. We don't do that enough, right? We never take time out to say, how am I spending my days? And very, very quickly, you'll realize, hey, you're 80, you're on your deathbed, and you're looking back and you're saying, where am I spend my time on? And are these the things I really wanted to do? And if it's not, then you make a plan for yourself, saying, how do I reallocate my basket so that I do have things that are important to me? And there are some ideas mentioned in the book. So I'm going to say, pick up the book and read it, and you might get some ideas.
3 people,
3 people.
whoever come to your mind.
Elon Musk, I think he's got vision. He's got this big bets, big vision for humanity, and he makes things happen. So, I'm very impressed by him. Eknath Easwaran, he's the one, he's written a lot of translations of Indian texts, the Upanishads and the Vedas, and he brings his perspective in. Love the man and love his writing. It would be remiss of me if I didn't mention a writer in there. And then Michelle Obama, because I just read her autobiography and it's filled with such grace and charm, traits that are missing in the world today, I think. So it's just very inspiring to see a woman do all of those. So
3 books.
anything from Dave Barry. Dave Barry used to be a journalist with the Miami Herald. He's a Pulitzer Prize winner. He writes funny pieces. If you haven't read a Dave Barry book, I would urge you to read it. I was really inspired by him and I started blogging. So I write funny blogs. That's my genre. And I was very, very inspired by the man. Any book of Dave Barry's is super fun. Like I was mentioning, Eknath Easwaran, his translation of the Upanishads especially is a classic. It's a beautiful book. And of course, my book, The Store of Life, which is available on Amazon. Simple book. I think it's a fun book. Go pick it up if you want.
And what does success mean to you?
That's a wonderful question, right? I don't know if there is a single definition of what success means, but I feel like I want to live my life, not just exist. So I want to live fully and experience everything that life has to offer and be true to myself. So that book that I've written is really how I live my life. So I want to have a content life, do the things that are important to me, spend time on things that are important to me. And like I said, it's not just going through the motion, live with passion till the very last breath. Saying passionate person who lived, not just existed, that would be a success for me. And giving every moment its 100%, living in the here and now, giving the person I'm with my complete attention, the problem that I'm working on my complete attention, this moment, give it the respect that it deserves. If I can live like that moment to moment, then that's successful.
Brilliant, Shruthi. That's a great place to close this conversation.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Pritish.
You can find the show notes for this episode and every other episode on 1%.live. If you enjoyed this conversation, share it on social media and leave a review. See you next time.